Bill?
I think it's an issue that we need to put on the table and look at. I look at the city of Champlin gets about $700,000 a year local government aid. City of Virginia, Paul had brought up, gets $14 million. City of Champlin and Virginia are the same size. What's the difference? It's been politically motivated, and the formula through the years has been so skewed. And legislation every year is put in by legislators to up their local government aid in my community and your community and all over. But it all comes back to spending. It's just like if you help somebody out and they need $100 and you give it to them, they say, I gotta buy groceries, but they go to the movies and they take their wife out to dinner instead of buying groceries for their kids. You know, that's what we gotta look at with local government. What are they spending their money on? When the city of Brooklyn Parks has got a human services department, what do they need a human services department in the city hall? You know, and the city paying for it. We got, you know, everybody's got to look within their budgets and see what they're spending their money on. And I think that's part of the whole LGA process, is to re-look at the whole system.
David?
The reason I said no is that I think you've got a situation right now where you've got a lot of dependency on state money. And I don't think you can, in 1 year or 2 years, just say we're going to eliminate that.
Were you the one that said no, not immediately?
That's right.
Okay, so would you say it should be phased out over time?
I think it should be phased out over time, although I do think there is an argument that I've talked to people in large regional centers in Minnesota that have a daytime population that is maybe 3 or 4 times their permanent population. And so they're attracting a lot of folks from the surrounding communities to come, and there may be an argument that they should have some authority to tax some of those people or some of the communities that are coming into their regional center to provide the infrastructure needs that they have to accommodate that traffic. So I think there might be a way to look at finding some help from communities to bring to a regional center to allow it to be a regional center. But I don't think what we have today is anywhere near that. I think that it is a political slush fund that is being operated at the state level. It has created a dependency. It has interfered with that relationship between people and elected officials. We have delegations of people coming to the Capitol to lobbyists on their school board issues. And I ask them, why don't you go to your school board? And they say, well, what difference does it make? All the decisions are made here, and that's the problem. When you get 70% of the money coming from the state, all the decisions, in effect, get made at the state level. And we need to restore the connection of people to their elected officials. And to do that, you're going to have to address this. I just don't think you can do it in 1 year or 2 years.
Phil?
The only reason I would consider some LGA is because in outstate Minnesota we have some populations that are far-flung, and they don't have the capital base to generate the funds for some essential services like fire and police. And that's where I come from on that issue.
Marty?
The LGA system is broken as it is right now. We have, Minneapolis has more wealth per capita than any city in the state. You've got Lake of the Isles, you've got downtown, glistening buildings, etc. And we've got R.T. Ryback with his little neighborhood redevelopment programs to squirrel it around to Acorn and the like. So absolutely, we need to downsize and reform the system. But I represent a district in rural Minnesota where we have communities of 200 and 300 people, where majority of the people are retired, live on fixed incomes, and they need their streets plowed and they need fire protection. And Phil is correct. We need to represent the whole state. And it'd be easy to come in and say, you know, to a very conservative Republican crowd, we're going to abolish the whole thing. But the reality is those little communities out there, I'm not going to take an 80-year-old woman and hand her a snow shovel and say, sorry, you go shovel your own street in front of your home because we're going to get rid of LGA. Because at the end of the day, they have very, very limited tax base and no income to pay for it. And I know that you're not going to agree with that per se, but that's the way it is. And so downsize and reform, yes, but abolish the whole thing, no.
Well, that's exactly where I'm at, where Phil and Marty are at. LGA was developed for a specific reason, for old cities that we feel still need to belong in Minnesota, still provide something vital to the state of Minnesota in terms of a base for employment, for education, for those issues, but it should be very well tested as to whether or not they should receive any of this aid, because it is redistribution. So it should be for only issues of public safety, the transportation, the education, the types of issues that exist within the Constitution of Minnesota. Beyond that, if they can afford glistening new parks, if they have all kinds of new development, that was an issue where right off the get-go, those kind of cities were never intended to have LGA. It was only for old cities with aging infrastructure, with issues of keeping those public safety issues alive and keeping those cities alive and well in Minnesota. Those were supposed to get this LGA, and no one else under any other auspice should get it.
Paul, I haven't messed with you on a follow-up yet, so I just want to ask you a question. LGA is for these cities that they can't make it on their own, they don't have a tax base, they're going away, but they provide tremendous value needed here in Minnesota, just like ballparks. Isn't it the same argument?
No, it's not the same argument. There are a couple things that government has to do, and we've heard a couple of responses as to what that. Public safety is a role for government. Some of the critical infrastructure. I mean, when you flush your toilet, you want the stuff to go someplace, right? Well,
There, we can agree on that.
so I do think, as Marty and Phil, and I don't know if Mike said it. Well, yeah, I think Mike did say it. That there, you know, we have challenges across the state of Minnesota. Communities are different across the state of Minnesota. Here in Carver County, we're blessed. We have some very high, high property value areas. But in far southwestern Carver County, the little town of Hamburg is dealing with enormous challenges trying to comply, unfortunately, with federal water mandates. They have 200 homes, and they have to do over $1 million worth of update to their sewer system. They can't today afford to pay for all of that on their own. And they do need some help. There's some infrastructure issues that we need to make sure that communities that don't have the tax base have the ability to do. Now, I want to be very clear. When I talk about public safety, I don't believe that every single community that has 500 people needs 5 police officers and a chief and a squad car, or 6 squad cars and a jail. Here in Carver County, we use community policing. Our sheriff's department provides policing to most of the communities here in Carver County. That's not the right answer for all of the state, but it is something we need to look at.
Pat?
I'll go beyond again and write a thesis on this. There's 2 different things. One is cities and one is counties. First of all, cities and counties are creatures of the state. They were created by the state, and in one fell swoop, the state legislature and governor could get rid of all county and city lines and school district lines. So they are creatures. They were created to carry out constitutional responsibilities. Cities and one of their main things is public safety, so police and fire. And that is in our state constitution, that we provide public safety, and we just sort of say, okay, local government, we're going to give this job to you. LGA was set up back in the 70s. It was to sort of spread the wealth around with state dollars, and it got absolutely convoluted. In 2003, I did a study on local government aid, and it showed that the more dollars the city gets in LGA, the more they spend on non-essential services. And if you recall, back in 2003, I coined that term non-essential services, and I got beat up by the librarians, by the way, because I said they were non-essential, but from a city standpoint. But
At least they were quiet about it, I bet.
well, no, they weren't. No. But they're not essential government services at the city level, so I stick to that. We need to have a system where if a local unit of government doesn't have the tax base to provide essential mandated constitutional services, that we help them. And from the state level, because we are responsible for that ultimately at the state level. But all the other things that a city chooses to do, it's not essential, they should pay for themselves. Thanks.